Here we go, recording. So welcome to today's instance of the Cloud Foundry for Kubernetes. Everybody is calling in from home meeting. Welcome to today's instance, just browsing through the channel to see the latest votes. I would say, unfortunately, this time we kind of have the leftover topics that we couldn't touch upon for like the last instances of this meeting, and as indicated in the chat, having Jules on the call would have been good, also to see some signs of life from Great Britain. But yeah, let's see, probably, or maybe he's still joining. Other than that, I guess one topic for this round would be, let's say, assuming that we kind of don't have too many kind of standard topics. Is there anything that we should do to like the frequency of the meeting, or should we kind of move to a more regular agenda with like teams working on various topics, just providing updates? I think that would be probably a discussion beyond the topic that I think has won the poll with like 3 votes out of a total of 4 votes provided, which is what are we doing next / now that we should, what are we not doing next / now that we should be doing next / now. Question provided by Jules. As I said, unfortunately he's not on this call. So any ideas on that particular question, and then we should come back to like the overall question in terms of cadence or changing the structure of the meeting slightly. Nobody else has a topic.
I'm still waiting for Jules to do. I should have voted. I'm still waiting for Jules to do a demo. I want to see.
Yeah, that. Right. I mean, he was arguing, saying it is no longer an Irene 1.0 demo, and I would agree. Probably it's a 1 point something demo meanwhile, but yeah, getting an update where they are headed is probably a good thing to have. But especially for this topic, we would need Jules in the call, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, hard to do that.
Yeah. As last I understood, they were targeting additional V3 support. So things like rolling deploys and tasks and things like that.
Right. So rolling deploys was something that we kind of voted for because that's something that people use on our end already. Yeah. And obviously, like the whole discussion ties into like feature comparison / feature parity, where I think Sai mentioned that like this is also something that's upcoming to identify at least where the gaps are.
Yeah, when you mentioned tasks, I kind of was hoping that was already supported by the current API.
No.
Okay.
As far as I know, I've brought it up a few times, like where are the remaining gaps with them, and I've mentioned tasks, and Jules hasn't said no, that's already done. So
I think it's.
I think I browsed
tracker.
Yeah, I browsed the backlog as well recently and saw some stories around that.
Okay. That's one thing I hadn't tested. As for changing the format, I think we just need to be a little bit more active about suggesting new topics, because now we've whittled it down to the 2 that we either don't get to or we don't close. Because I know we've talked about option 1 before. What are we not doing next now? And I would love to change the wording of that. What should we be doing? Is what it should say. So to that end, I did post this blog post, which got a lot of traction thanks to the foundation, which I sort of unilaterally said what we're doing as a community, because I wanted, of course, to present a very united front, and we have CF and CF-for-K8s moving in the same direction. Broadly, that's true. It wasn't always true. Like we had, a couple of SIG meetings ago, it was actually kind of contentious. So first of all, has anyone read that and objected to anything in there? Because I just wrote it. I didn't sort of consult with too many people. I ran part of it by Sai to say, is this okay with you, what I'm saying about CF-for-K8s? But I just kind of barged ahead and did that. Any feedback from that, and or anything we need to talk about from the have there been more inquiries because of that post and the press release? No.
To be honest, I haven't read it yet, Troy. I was out last week.
Okay.
But I'll take a
It's
look.
not.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read it either yet, unfortunately.
It's not required reading or anything. I just want to check, cross-check what I'd written with you guys, which is basically, CubeCF is awesome. But this is my outstanding action item from the last SIG meeting, which is disambiguate CF-for-K8s and CubeCF. I had an initial conversation with the docs team, but I haven't followed up on that. So the plan was to do a blog post first to just sort of say, this is the CubeCF project, because it was going into incubation. Terrible time to use that word in a blog post. Here's, if you're wondering, here's CF-for-K8s, which is the Kubernetes idiomatic components which are being integrated together in this repository. And this is what the two of them do. So I'll pick up the docs thing again. And I've made a contact with someone on that team that was okay with me exploring that further, but I haven't done that yet. Just saying.
Yeah, as a quick glance over, it looks fine to me. Thanks for putting that together, Troy.
Cheers. Docs are next, and they will be important, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that, Troy.
If we're shy of topics, I can give a quick update.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we are planning to release 0.1 release of CF-for-K8s. We're hoping to do this week. There's some small documentation updates we want to make before we actually cut that release. So that should be out end of this week or early, like Monday or Tuesday. We get the CF push with build packs, and it contains all the highlights and known issues in the release notes, so you'll get to know what you can or cannot do. So that's coming up. I believe what's next for us is we are now focusing on the contribution workflow. So how do we consume releases from contributing projects, as we do with CFD today. Right now it's a bit spotty. We want to try to automate that as much as possible and create that sort of contract between us and the contributing teams. So that's in progress, and we plan to submit the proposal to CF dev mailing list to get feedback from the community. Right now it's going to circulation within the team at the moment. So pretty excited about that. Yeah, and the other part is we're also looking at the compatibility matrix of what K8s versions. As you all know, Kubernetes community version supports up to 3 versions, and they have a pretty, what do you call, a cadence for releasing every quarterly. So it's pretty, the pace is pretty high. So, and every minor release is a really minor major release. So every quarter they release, they have some breaking changes in the API. So how do we maintain that? What kind of support can we give to the community? So that's also under discussion. So a lot of things going on, a lot of threads and good amount of activity. So that's good. Any questions?
So when you say contribution workflow, that would also mean like putting a focus on making sure that when a component team releases, then you're like readily available to take up that new version relatively quickly, right?
That's true. That's right.
Mm.
Yeah. And then also configuration. How do we consume that as well? If there are any configuration changes. So, yeah, a lot of good work around that.
Cool.
A lot of brains at work. I think that's all I had. I mean, I have a PMC meeting today, so I'm going to probably provide a bit more details in that too. So you're all welcome to join.
My calendar has stopped updating. When is that PMC meeting? In an
It's
hour?
at 10:30 Pacific today.
Okay. I'll try and join just to listen to the updates. I found it really helpful, actually, being part of those. And I'll remind Vlad that he's on deck for updates. That's a new thing for us.
What time would that be? Local time for him? Many, right?
I don't know. He doesn't sleep, so it's fine.
What's the cause and effect there, though?
Yeah. Boundless energy, I've always attributed it to. So 10:30 Pacific, so an hour and a half from now. Got it.
8:30, probably. Oh, 8:30 p.m. his time.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, if nobody else has an additional topic, then probably wanted to pick up on something that was at least briefly mentioned in some of the calls, but then I think I keep hearing the topic every now and then, which is like migration. So kind of moving stuff from one Cloud Foundry to another one. And then like obviously there could be variations in terms of what that other Cloud Foundry actually is. So obviously like moving from a Bosch-based CF to a Kubernetes-based one is one use case. But I guess on our end, we even have use cases where we want to move workloads from one Bosch-based CF to another one. So wanted to, let's say, see if there's like a common interest in the topic, and then obviously like from our perspective, you have a couple of angles to look at that. Like what kind of migration do you provide? Do you like even consider backing service content in that migration, or is that something that you keep out of scope? Do you quote unquote just like migrate over like org structure, so CF orgs and spaces and user assignments, and do you then, because like people will anyhow need to change their endpoints, or kind of ask them to repush their applications, or is that something that you would migrate over? So I think those are topics that are of interest to us. Not that we've really spent implementation effort on it, but it comes up every now and then.
To be clear, because this is, I'm sure we've all heard stories like this before, but there's a very wide range. So you're not talking about generic backup restore, but you're talking about migration where you should expect a variant level of service or configuration between the two systems?
Well, ultimately, yes. I mean, backup and restore in my mind would mean like backing up an entire Cloud Foundry system and kind of restoring it in place, so to speak. So I think when I say migration, as I said, I would at least expect the endpoint of that Cloud Foundry system changes, and then like depending on how sophisticated you want to be, you might have different levels of migration, and that might just be kind of some support to move over things like user assignments, but it might also be requirements around like what would we need to do in order to, let's say, move a customer or tenant that actually doesn't want to move, right? So I think that's like the ultimate scenario where like the need to move more comes from us as a platform provider. So for example, Cloud Foundry deployments growing too big might be a use case, but then even things that Sai mentioned, where, like, for example, there's a question of Kubernetes version updates, and then do you want to like in place update your Kubernetes cluster, or do you also need to have like some migration tooling to actually seamlessly move over workloads from one deployment to another one? So it's actually a very broad range, and like I don't think that we've settled on one concept or one end of the spectrum already, but just
so in the, I mean, there's the Bosch backup restore, which could be updated for a Kubernetes world. There's also the one that Dr. Max sent the next incubation request from us, is the Cloud Foundry plugin for backup and restore at the Cloud Foundry command level, which is designed and has successfully been used in the last case you're talking about, where a customer is either moving hardware, they're moving the same system, the similar system to the to new hardware or a new Kubernetes installation, but in effect it's the same user set, org set, and that's that tool, which does actually have some options. The data services you have to handle yourself, although there's a easily prescribed way you can do that depending on your data services.
And Jeff, some updates there. So I've actually back-channeled with Vlad, who's in another call. We're in the process of moving that plugin into the foundation. IBM has expressed interest in collaborating on it. So it's an API-based backup and restore. And we're going to be adding some things to it which are missing right now. I can't paste in the Zoom meeting, but it's in the CF-for-K8s channel. I just pasted the link there. So we're planning to add services migration or service binding migration and UAA deets as well. So using the API rather than getting into the database export. I'm not exactly sure how all the magic's going to work, and Vlad has to give that the details of that. But they have something in the works and are going to be looking for collaboration on that plugin once it's upstream. And that would be in the extensions PMC.
Yeah, so that's targeting, again, the last case from a service vendor or service provider point of view. It doesn't target as much cherry picking, like one group out of 10 or something like that. But so that's one of the areas.
Yeah, but that's another feature that they want to implement, which orgs, apps, or spaces to migrate, so that you could cherry pick, essentially.
Yeah, I would say like VMware, we don't have active investment in this just yet, as we're mostly focused on investing in making a solid place to land. But it's an area of interest for us, and our in talking with some of our customers, I think they're thinking that they're much more interested in how could they do this in a deliberate, slow fashion, right? There's not, I think the idea of a big bang migration is very scary and hard to get right. There was one customer who was saying, well, we have so many surrounding things on top of Cloud Foundry that for a vendor or contributor to CF to imagine you could build like a perfect migrator tool there might be pieces that might be helpful for that, but we couldn't really manage a full big bang for them because of just what they've built up around it. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you think about the capabilities are going to be a little bit different. You kind of want to be able to say, okay, maybe this portion of apps that are ready to go and we can start getting runway on those. And so maybe that's like the smaller targeted things you were discussing, Troy.
Yeah, I think that's we've heard that as well, and it depends on the customer entirely. Some people want to do an in-place upgrade with no additional hardware, which is an extremely hard thing to manage. Other people are like, no, I would never try that. I'm going to set up a completely duplicate parallel CF, and then move things over in my own time.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, I get that, and I think that's the idea with the API-based plugin, that it just provides some functionality to pull down. I mean, right now it'll just pull down everything from the organization, and then you can restore. I can't remember; it's been years since I've used this thing.
I think there's a similar tool that some of the Pivotal and VMware professional services folks have written called CF management, that's mostly focused on propagating or backing up and restoring that organizational structure. I'll drop a link into the CF-for-K8s channel to that.
Yeah, and I think that's more kind of from the outside in, kind of declaratively, like these are kind of the orgs and users, and we'd like to stamp it out to a number of foundations because or installations of Cloud Foundry, because they're already, with the hardware life cycle every few years having to build new foundations and whatnot, and then trying to replicate more or less their org user structure and telling people, okay, these are your new endpoints, these are your new domains, and please manage your migration over.
And so it sounds like mostly people are saying backing services, data services, those would need to be migrated separately. Is that how generally people approach it?
Yeah, I don't know if we have good out-of-the-box generic solutions for those yet. It might be worth us trying to be a little more specific around the kinds of migrations that we might be trying to support. Because I can see a difference between migrating one CF instance and those backing services from like a network in one geographic location to a totally other geographic location versus doing one that's more local because you're trying to do like a switch from a Bosch-based distro to a K8s-based one.
Yeah, we had a migration like this when we had a customer go from Staccato to CAP, and it was difficult for us to move the service bindings because actually the database was staying in the same place in their data center, and the binding had to move, but then the broker, what was the problem? The broker didn't know about the fact that it was also moving. I can't remember. No, because we got it out of the CCDB. We ended up going in and doing surgery in the CCDB to make it all fit. But it would have been really nice if the plugin could have handled that somehow, and that there was something that would have been nice in the API, I think, to make the migration happen. And I'd have to ask Vlad about that. So I'll ping him about that.
Well, I'm guessing it might be that, like, if you solely go via the API, you would need to do a CF-Create instance, right? And that might create something different than what the source system actually understood under that.
That's right. We would have
entity.
to do create instance with the same IDs, right? We would have to recreate instance essentially, rather than get a new binding. That's why we couldn't do it with the API.
Mhm.
Anyway, we had the requirement in there somewhere. So once this goes upstream, the plugin goes upstream, it would make more sense to have the corresponding feature request for the API submitted as well.
It really needs like some concentrated effort to like kind of think about all of these scenarios, try to be transparent about like what's being worked on at all, if nothing, and how to advocate for attention to the different scenarios. And I'm curious, Bernd, if you have folks who are concentrating in this area. And
as I said, not yet fully, but we see that topic as definitely something that will come up. I'm kind of tempted, even though kind of looking at my schedule, I won't be able to really come up with something short term, but I'm tempted to kind of put something together in terms of these scenarios and thoughts and ideas, and probably also like the links to the tooling that exists today, and then probably circulated in this round to get some feedback and inputs. But no promises on, let's say, having that in the next 2 weeks or so, but I'll like try and put some work into that topic.
I need to drop off, but it was good seeing everyone.
Thanks, Yuri.
Bye.
Talk to you next time.
Bye, Yuri.
So I guess as we don't have, let's say, too many topics coming up this time, so probably let's switch over to like the other parts. So Troy, you said like we should be more proactive in putting in topics. So other than my reminders, which I guess are meanwhile drowning in other discussion related to CF on K8s, what else could we do to kind of incentivize people to either proactively like present topics or at least bring up topics that we could discuss about?
What do I think we should do?
Yeah,
not
only
shorter,
you, but like this round.
I think we should make the meetings shorter and more social. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, I'm always tempted to send some more nagging reminders to people to fill out the poll. I'm not sure if that is too appreciated. And also, I don't know if like this adhere thing works in like these Slack channels, and then that might probably not.
That might backfire on you in terms of
exactly.
sentiment.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I see the same problems around like it's kind of hard to get people to think about that in advance. I don't know that I have a good solution.
One option we could do is we voluntold, in the sense that we have a set of topics that we want to discuss, and then find an individual who may be leading that project or knows more about it, and then give them at least a week or two advance that we want to talk about this. So that way the agenda at least is planned out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, instead of asking people what they want to talk about.
So that would probably also involve creating something like a document where people could just like put in those line items, as opposed to having them like distributed all across the Slack channel in those.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we see
separate calls, right?
Yeah, as this group, we can seed it. Like we can just do a dump in sort of topics we want to discuss that could help each of our projects or other projects on top of their minds, and then we find the right person who could help us deep dive into that, or could just be an open discussion. But I think we should seed some topics, and then we just say, here, this Tuesday we're going to talk about this, and then next Tuesday we're going to talk about this. That's a different approach than what you have today, is requesting for topics and voting on them.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely. So I'll take another action and come up with such a collection document, probably send it to the Slack channel, plus probably via mail to this round of people here, and then ask everybody to come up with their topic suggestions, and then plan a little bit upfront on what's going to be presented. I'll make up my mind on like the mode on how we do that.
Okay.
Probably one week in advance, kind of closing the poll already, and then letting the named people know that they are actually up for a presentation. Double checking if they are actually available and have content to show something.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
I'll
I think
take
it is. I think it is worth evaluating what we really want the cadence of this meeting to be, if it's not redundant with other things. I mean, because we've moved a lot of the activity into the runtime PMC, and so I think some of those discussions are naturally going to happen there. Mm-hmm. Of course, everyone's welcome to join those too. And then we also have the CAB call on a monthly cadence for some of those other things. So I think we should maybe plan to have the one in 2 weeks, but maybe that could be a meta discussion topic, is what do we want to do in the future with this meeting? Do we want to shorten it, make it less frequent? Maybe try that out.
Makes sense. Let's do that.
Cool.
All right, I've got to drop too.
Yeah. So I think we can close for now. Thanks everybody for joining in, and then I'll follow up as discussed.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye.
Talk to you next time. Bye.